All right, everyone. Thanks for attending. Tim, can you hear me now? All right. I see in the chat, I was just quiet for a bit. So uh, hopefully my audio is coming through okay. All right, great. So yeah, again, thanks everyone for joining. This is our solar variance meeting for the Phoenix District Office. Let me put my video on for just a second. Let's see here, start the video. There we go. So my name is Derek Eisenbach. I am with BLM Arizona, and I am in the Arizona State Office. We're based in Phoenix, and I'm a project manager here, and I'm also the Renewable Energy Program lead, which means that I work with our field and district offices statewide on the permitting of our renewable energy development applications. In Arizona, that would be wind and solar. And solar is kind of a unique application process, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And that is why we're having the meeting today. But before we get started, I wanted to give a chance for some of our BLM staff to introduce themselves. So we have a lot of staff on, and I don't think we will have the time to go through everyone here, but I at least wanted to introduce our management team out in the Phoenix District Office. So I'll start with Ryan Randell. Ryan Randell is an acting project manager. So Ryan, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Derek. Yeah, my name is Ryan Rendell. I'm the acting project manager for the Phoenix District for Renewable Energy, which includes these variance projects. And I'm glad to be here. We also have on Katie Weibel. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Katie Whiteful. I'm the acting field manager for the Lower Sonoran Field Office situated in the Phoenix District Office.
Great. And we also have Irina Ford on. Irina, can you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Irina Ford, and I am the field manager in the Hassayampa Field Office.
All right, Derek.
All right, thanks. And we have 3 project teams with us today. I'll give a chance for those teams to introduce themselves when it's their turn to present. Those teams include the applicants and the development team with that, environmental consultants, and including some their natural resource staff that is working on these projects as well. So we have a lot of expertise in the room between BLM and our project teams. So we will have an opportunity to hear from all as this goes on. So again, thanks everyone for joining. But before I get going here, I want to talk a bit about the solar variance process and what we're doing here. So this meeting is being held as part of BLM's solar variance process, under which the Lower Sonoran Field Office and the Hassayampa Field Office are considering applications for 4 solar energy rights-of-way on BLM managed public land. The BLM manages public lands for multiple uses, including recreation, livestock grazing, natural resource conservation, mining, and rights-of-way for renewable energy. After receiving a project application, BLM will look at it for plan conformance with its resource management plan and initiate a hard look for environmental analysis under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. This public process is what most members of the public are familiar with. But today, we're kind of focused on that first step, which is ensuring conformance with the resource management plan, or the plans that kind of structure our management approaches to public lands. So our resource management plans consider solar energy projects under rules issued in 2012 and 2013 under what's called the Western Solar Plan and the Restoration Design Energy Project, or RDEP. So these plans were collaboratively developed, and they establish a process and criteria which must be met before a project can be accepted and begin its permitting under NEPA. When it comes to solar energy, BLM lands fall into one of 3 categories. First, we have the solar energy zones, or what we abbreviate as SEZs, and these have been designated as preferred locations under the Western Solar Plan, and thus they are we see those as being in plan conformance. So it's a bit of a green light, if you will, that these projects proposed in those areas would be in line with our management objectives in our resource management plan. In BLM AZ, we have 3 solar energy zones and all have committed projects within them at various stages of application. So those are no longer really available. Second, there are lands that are excluded from solar development, and these lands include wilderness areas, national conservation lands, ACECs, mapped critical habitat. And there's about 20 other criteria that go in there. And these are areas that BLM would rarely, if ever, permit solar energy rights of way in. And then we have all this remaining land. So we have the kind of green light, if you will, we have the red light areas, and then we have this big kind of category of sort of yellow lights, if you will. And this is what we call variance land. And this is lands that may be appropriate for application on a case-by-case basis, but only after a process through which stakeholders, cultural and natural resource staff, and the general public have had an opportunity to examine the project concepts and comment. If BLM determines that a project may move forward, then permitting would continue under NEPA and the public would be afforded continued opportunities to participate in scoping and comment periods. So our objectives today are to present these proposals to the public, offer a chance for you all to ask questions, get some answers, and a chance for us to collect comments that we can consider at this early stage of project development. After we get through the presentations, I'll talk a bit about the next steps and the kind of end game of the variance process and where we'll go from here. So with that, I want to stop for a second and see if we have anybody else joining. All right, we're good in terms of attendance. And I will move right ahead and invite our first presenter to take the floor here and talk about the Mariposa solar project. So Mariposa team, take it away.
Thanks, Derek. My name is Robert Wilson. I'm development manager with Q Cells. Our applicant entity was one of our subsidiaries, HQC Solar Holdings 1 LLC. Derek, can you confirm you're seeing my shared screen?
It's all good, Robert. We can see it. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'll introduce you to Q Cells. I'll introduce our financial partner, Hanwha, as well. I'll discuss the Mariposa solar energy project a little bit, and then I'm happy to take any questions. Q Cells USA is a entity owned by Hanwha Solutions and Q Cells, a solar module manufacturer. We've got a facility in Georgia manufacturing panels on US soil. We've got 6.7 gigawatts in the solar pipeline, 11 gigawatts in this energy storage pipeline, and some of those projects can be combined. So we have some of our financial numbers there as well. Hanwha, our partner in South Korea, they are a South Korean utility, strong backing from Hanwha Group, a Fortune 500 company and the 7th largest conglomerate in South Korea. A little bit about the Mariposa project. It's located south of Goodyear, northwest of Maricopa and Mobile. The BLM acreage is in the unincorporated area of Maricopa County. It's a 2,350 acre SF 299 application that we're discussing in our variance report. Not a lot of, there's maybe 1 or 2 dilapidated residences in and around the project area. It's pretty remote. There are no paved roads out to the area. As you can see, this is generally the imagery out there, pretty flat, a little bit of ephemeral streams. The lines in this image that you can see here, that's an SRP 500 kV line that we are going to be tapping into. It's a 410 megawatt energy facility. We will be incorporating an energy storage aspect to it to provide SRP with some grid resiliency. Our GenTie line would be tapping into that 500 kV SRP line approximately 2 miles, not too long, so minimal impact as far as footprint goes. It's got excellent solar energy resource out there. There's the existing 500 kV transmission facilities that we've identified as having capacity. There's access to some roadways that I can show you in a couple slides from now, and generally flat, no high slope areas. We're out of any sort of reservation areas. And you can see on the right side, that's the BLM acreage that we've applied for here. These two images show some of the roads that are around. Komatke Road comes up from Mobile. And then there's also Bullard Avenue and Patterson Road that that kind of meander through the variance zone. The image on the right does show some of the floodplain. That area we would not be building in, but coincidentally, it's also been suggested that it could be utilized as sort of a wildlife mitigation corridor. This is a rough depiction of what the footprint would look like. There's, some perimeter roads, some transformers. Those are our modules on racking. It would have a security fence around it, along with, some bird detection cameras and regular, facilities that we install on a regular basis on our projects. All in all, this project, we would be investing $520 million in the community, about 600 jobs during construction with some full-time jobs during the project life, approximately 8 to 10, and an unmanned O&M building that we would keep, equipment stored in. There'd be 41.5 million in property tax revenue in our latest assessment that we looked into. And all in all, we're looking at just about 13 million tons of avoided CO2 emissions per year. This is our timeline as we move into construction. We submitted the BLM lease back in January 2022. As you all know, we're currently in the BLM variance process. We shoot to hopefully start our NEPA studies this summer and moving in through the winter. That's when we'll have boots on the ground conducting ESAs, phase 1 environmental, all the necessary NEPA studies that we'll be doing. Then we'll move into our EPC initiation and preparation. We've kicked off some preliminary estimates with our EPC team. But this is when we'll really be locking down the facilities that we'll be installing. And then we aim to start construction and start site prep Q4 2024 and be operational in Q4 2025. So that will be continuing operations through the end of the project life. Not a lot of traffic, not a lot of need for municipal utilities to be expanded into the project area, very little use of water. So it's a pretty quiet project for its lifespan. And this is my contact information if you need it. I'm happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, so for those of you who have joined us, questions, we are open right now. So if you would please either put your hand up in the chat as we can see you on our participant list, or enter a question in on the chat, and we will kind of queue up questions here and give you the floor. All right, we have a question from Tim Flood. Would the project alter the flow regimes in the washes?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Tim. with the Clean Water Act and with the ephemeral streams, we're doing all we can to avoid any of those washes. We wouldn't be grading into them. We, might bury some collector lines underneath, but we would be required to restore them to the state that they were in. We've just finished a limited wetland delineation study, and we're scheduling a meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers to discuss our findings. Hopefully they'll give us some input as to what they deem as jurisdictional and what they don't. But to answer your question briefly, yeah, we would do all that we can to avoid affecting the flow in those washes.
Thanks for the question, Tim. All right, it's a little bit quiet right now. So for those of you that may be developing questions or, something comes up later on, we will have some chance to do some go backs, but we'll move ahead in our presentations right now. So if you do have a question, just kind of jot that down, and we'll have a chance to kind of come back and revisit any questions that didn't get a chance to be asked. But our next presenter is the Atlas North project from 174 Power Global, and I will turn it over to Atlas North's team to take it away.
Okay, is my audio coming through, and can you see the presentation?
Yep, everything looks good, Stephanie, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Derek. My name is Stephanie Lauer, and I am the Environmental Permitting Manager for 174 Power Global and our subsidiary, Atlas North Solar LLC. With me here today is Deal Lundeen, our Project Manager and Senior Cultural Resources Specialist from our environmental consultant, Aztec. And we are here today to solicit feedback from the public on a variance request to allow solar development on BLM's Section 16, which is surrounded by the Atlas North Solar Project on state lands in La Paz County. First, a little bit about us. 174 Power Global is the U.S. solar and battery energy storage arm of Hanwha Energy, a Korean company. And we are sister companies with Q-Cells that Robert Wilson just presented the Mariposa project previously. We also develop, own, and operate utility scale PV solar and battery energy storage projects across the US. And 174 Power Global is currently pursuing over 2,000 megawatts of solar in Arizona across several projects. Next is some context of how BLM's Section 16 fits into the overall Atlas North Solar Project. The Atlas North Solar Project is the blue state lands north of I-10 in La Paz County, bounded by the heavy black line shown on the map on the right. The Atlas North Solar Project will include a solar PV project and battery energy storage on up to 6,900 acres of state land. It will utilize a 500 kV gentie to connect onto the grid via the 10 West Link transmission line. Access to the site will be via Storefinger Road, which would remain open to the public. And we expect construction to start in late 2023. And you can see BLM Section 16 here, islanded within the state land, bounded by a red line and surrounded by the Atlas North project. We are requesting a variance from BLM so we can include Section 16 in the project. However, the Atlas North Solar Project does not require Section 16 and therefore could move forward independently of BLM's decision on the variance. I'd like to describe the development that would potentially occur on BLM Section 16. As you can see, Section 16 would have only additional solar modules and inverters that would contribute to Atlas North. Energy from Section 16 would be collected via underground collection lines and brought to the substation, where it would be transferred onto the 500 kV gen-tie. There are several environmental considerations that we looked at when deciding to request a variance for Section 16. First, both the development on Section 16 and the project as a whole will avoid hydrologic features. Section 16 does not contain BLM Category 2 or 3 desert tortoise habitat and is not considered suitable habitat for tortoise. And it's also not critical habitat for any big game species. The site is relatively flat and therefore will require little grading, and the vegetation is very sparse. Finally, a Class 3 cultural resources survey and biosurvey will be conducted this spring and summer if the variance is approved. And that's all I have to present on BLM Section 16 in Atlas North, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. That was great. And the floor is open for questions. Again, I'd ask if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat box, and we will queue those up and get your question out. All right, I'm not seeing any questions pop up, and so I think we will push forward in our presentations. If anyone out there is thinking about a question, I can encourage you to go ahead and jot that down and get it into the chat box. We will have a chance to do some go backs. This will be our last presentation for the evening here, so we have plenty of time on the schedule to go back and get other questions answered. So don't give up if you're still thinking about things. But in the meantime, we will push forward with our next presenter. And this will be NextEra Energy presenting the West Valley North and the West Valley South projects. So with that, take it away, NextEra.
Good deal. Thanks, Derek. Good evening, folks. My name is Steve Lowe. I work in the development group at NextEra. We are joined this evening with colleagues from our environmental services team, including Eric Koster, David Brown, and Alex Simons. And from our environmental consultant, SWCA, we have Ryan Roush, Bo Gregson, and Scott DeBosch. So happy to answer any questions when we get to the end. First, wanted to share a little bit about our company. Dave, if we could just go to that first slide. I think you're driving. Thank you, sir. NextEra Energy is a publicly traded company with a market capitalization in excess of $150 billion. It owns two entities, Florida Power and Light, which along with Gulf Power is the largest electric utility in North America, Florida-based. And it also, NextEra Energy also owns NextEra Energy Resources, of which we are employees. And NextEra Energy Resources is active in 46 states, developing solar, wind, and energy storage. In Arizona, for example, we have invested over $1.2 billion capital on wind, solar, and energy storage, pay approximately $1 million in property taxes every year, approximately $1 million in lease payments to landowners every year, and approximately $1.5 million in salaries to solar and wind technicians in Arizona every year. David, we can go to the next one. Thank you. Just wanted to give folks an idea, an overview of the projects we have. In blue, we have operating assets. White Hills and Perrin Ranch in the north are wind farms. And in the south, we have a solar plus storage facility and a battery storage facility. Those are all in blue. And in green, we have solar and solar plus storage facilities that we are currently developing the storage so that we can deliver electricity after the sun has gone down. Course. And the red star is the location for West Valley North and West Valley South solar plus storage facilities that we'll be talking about tonight in Mariposa County, just west of Phoenix. Next one, David, one more, I think. For purpose and need, why are we doing this? The first bullet explains, as Derek explained, we go through the variance process so that lands that are currently designated as variance lands eligible for NEPA and eligible for the development of renewables. Pointing out here in the second bullet that would be that would conform to Executive Order 14008, which calls for additional development of solar power on public lands. And if implemented, based on our proximity to transmission lines, we would be able to deliver that power to electrical users. And lastly, maybe most importantly, development of this project would help Arizona meet their renewable energy standard, which is currently 15%, very likely going higher to conform with the much more ambitious goals that the utilities have set for themselves. With that, I will hand it over to David to go through the project in detail.
Thank you, Steve. I'll start with an introduction of our West Valley North project. See if I can do this. So as Steve indicated, here's the project location. Approximately up to 1,400 megawatts of solar PV. The original boundary that we applied for is about 8,500 acres of public land administered by BLM's Hassayampa field office. We would have a gen tie interconnecting with the Arizona Public Services Delaney substation, which I'll show on the next slide. We do have an interconnection agreement with them at that location, and if approved, we would expect this to be operational in March of 2026. Here's a slide showing a little more detail of the project. You can see the blue outline of the preliminary boundary to begin with. And then you can see south of that, there is the Central Arizona Project Canal, which conveys water from the Colorado River to the central Arizona, obviously. And then south of that, there are two transmission lines, the existing Devers Palo Verde 500 kV transmission line, and then the recently approved 10 West Link 500 kV transmission line. You can see the Delaney substation down in the corner here, right there, and that would be where we're headed. Our preliminary analysis as part of the variance process, short interconnection with Delaney. It is close to I-10 and the Sloan Road, generally located in an area with low resource conflicts, does not conflict with values determined in BLM's solar energy program and resource management plan. It is not within any designated SRMAs or extensive recreation management areas. This is kind of some site photos, as you can see there from a drone. They're a little warped, so I'm going to drag this image over. Hopefully you guys can see it. And I'll just pan around. It's a pretty homogeneous landscape, as you can see, and this is basically what it looks like. And I'll just proceed around the dial, so to speak. Obviously looking south there. So our West Valley South project would be over here. And then continuing around, now looking to the east, spinning around towards the north. And going all the way around back to the west. And finishing up pretty much where we started. Minimize that, back to the PowerPoint. So next slide. So in terms of some of the initial analyses we expect, this is in red. You can see here, this is VRM class 1 lands. We are located adjacent to that. We're in VRM class 3, but we are adjacent to class 1 lands. We would fully expect to do some visual analysis studies as part of our NEPA probably looking at sensitive view sheds, as well as preparing some visual simulations. We also always do a glint and glare study. Of course, we will comply with BLM design features and any mitigation measures that come out of the NEPA analysis should we proceed to NEPA. And this is a slide indicating some of the desert tortoise habitat in the area. This color right here is what's called category 3. And this is defined as not essential to the maintenance of viable populations, but you can see we are adjacent to category 2, and in some cases overlap that just by a small amount. That is essential to the maintenance of viable populations. On the right here, you can see kind of some statistics in terms of like our acreage within those 2 different habitats. Habitat categories. We do intend to do intensive pedestrian surveys consistent with agency guidelines. And again, we intend to be compliant with all BLM design features or any mitigation measures that would result from the NEPA analysis. Now to the West Valley South project. This again, same general project location. This one is a little bit smaller. It's about 1,100 megawatts, up to 1,100 megawatts, about just over 6,300 acres. Same GenTie and interconnection and operational dates, if approved. This is the project itself, the blue boundary, the preliminary outline. You can see now we're on the south, pardon me, the south side of those 500 kV lines and the Cap Canal. And the Delaney substation you can see down here. Again, short interconnection, a little bit shorter to Delaney. It is close to I-10 and the Sloan Road, located in an area of low resource conflict from our preliminary analysis, does not conflict with values in BLM solar energy program. And again, not within any designated SRMAs or extensive recreation management areas. This is a drone footage. As you can see here, pretty similar landscape. This is taken from just over here in the project boundary. And let's see. So again, when it comes to VRM, we are completely located on VRM class 3. We're about a half mile away from class 1 VRM lands. Again, we would expect to do a full visual resource analysis as part of that visual resource impact analysis as part of NEPA, and do a glint and glare study. And of course, comply with any BLM design features or mitigation measures that would come out of NEPA. In terms of tortoise habitat, we nipped just a little bit of this category 3 habitat. Again, that's the habitat defined as not essential to maintenance of viable desert tortoise populations. And again, we intend to do full pedestrian surveys, intensive pedestrian surveys of the site, and will comply with any BLM design features or mitigation that comes out of NEPA. In conclusion, both projects are good candidates to proceed under NEPA in our opinion. They are efficient use of solar variance lands and in close proximity to a substation that is capable and actually has an existing interconnection. We don't see any issues that could cause major challenges under NEPA, but that is to be seen. And like I've mentioned a few times, we would fully incorporate any design features, BLM design features, and comply with mitigation measures that would result from NEPA. So that concludes our presentation. I will stop sharing now.
All right, thanks, David. We've got plenty of time for questions here. So I will again invite our attendees to put questions in the chat box, and we will run through those questions. Questions for NextEra or for any of our projects for that matter. Feel free to go ahead and throw those in there, and we'll call you out. All right, well, we'll give a couple more minutes here for questions to come in, but while we're waiting, I have put up an agenda here and I want to direct our attendees down here to the end, and I'll leave this up on the screen for now. We are accepting written comments from the public until June 18th, 2022. So that is 1 month out that we will have our kind of comment period open. There's lots of information to gather in addition to this presentation, which will be posted on our YouTube account. So anybody who's missed this, you can send along to colleagues and friends and neighbors if they wish to kind of check in on this through the presentation. They can also go to our project website here. I got the link there. That is to our e-planning site. And on there, there is some GIS data for those who want to make maps and are savvy with that. You can even bring that data into Google Earth if you want and play around with some maps on your own. We also have our variance factors analysis reports, and these are reports that the applicants have prepared that do essentially a desktop survey of potential cultural, natural resources and other land uses that may be impacted by the projects. So those are in a kind of preliminary stage. They've taken their first cut at it, and we actually are using this opportunity in the variance to both look internally here at BLM, but also collect comments from outside agencies and members of the public to include into there. And then lastly, any comments that you wish to submit, questions that you really would like to hear answered, other things you can shoot an email over to the email address on here, blm_az_pdo_solar@blm.gov. And you can also find my contact information, Ryan's contact information, and a couple other staffers on that project website. So you can send emails to us directly, and we'll be happy to get back to you. So I'll leave that up for now, but let's see, we do have some questions coming in, particularly about wildlife. Will wildlife corridors be identified in the EISs? And that would be the NEPA documents. So this is from Tim. Let's start with going back to the Mariposa project. Give Robert a chance to kind of add anything. He's talked a bit about using the wash and looking at the wash that runs through those parcels there as a wildlife corridor. But do you have anything else to add to that, Robert? And let's see, some follow-up. Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to go through the follow-up questions here as well.
I can actually show
burrowing
you
owls. Okay.
if you let me share my screen, I can show one of them.
Yeah, let me stop sharing for a second. All right, go for it.
So all available resources, if you can see that. Can you see that?
Yes.
So all of our available resources and research that we did showed that our project was outside of the wildlife movement corridor that we've identified here with the chat tool. If there was a discrepancy in, a corridor, then we would aim to accommodate it, and that would include not fencing the area. And so we'd kind of have a pathway for any wildlife to move around the project. As you can see here, we do have the wash there, which we wouldn't be building in because it's not ideal, and it's it's costly both from an insurance perspective, but also added costs of materials. So we are aiming to avoid that area. This does show, we are outside of the movement corridor that we've identified.
Great, thanks for that, Robert. Stephanie, any comments about biology or wildlife corridors out there?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Well, I can't speak to the Atlas North project as a whole, since the topic for this call is BLM Section 16, but we will maintain a substantial wildlife buffer between Interstate 10 and our fencing. And we also have an ephemeral wash that cuts through the southeastern portion of our of Section 16 that we'll be avoiding with panels that will also be open for a wildlife corridor. And further, as we go through should the variance be approved for section 16, then we will be extending our Atlas North biological survey onto section 16, and we'll identify any further mitigation needs associated with the section.
Thanks, Stephanie. And I'll go over to NextEra if somebody would like to speak a bit about wildlife and wildlife movement, migration corridors and whatnot in your projects.
Sure, I'll fill that. This is David Brown with NextEra. Certainly the wildlife corridors will be identified and analyzed as part of the EIS. We already know that, the adjacency with desert tortoise, that was something that the BLM brought up. It's something that we need to analyze and assess. We also expect that there could be some potential wildlife corridors associated with bighorns. One of the things that we are curious about is we're on the, basically on the other side of, between one project between I-10 and the Cap Canal, and then the other project on the north side of the Cap Canal, both of which are pretty serious impediments to wildlife movement as well. But we're looking forward to looking into that and seeing how we can design our projects to accommodate those. I could feel, while I'm on, Derek, I'll field the next question about burrowing owls in the chat. Yes, there probably are burrowing owls. We haven't done those studies yet. We hope if we're, if we get approval to move into NEPA, we would like to do, and I think the other applicants mentioned the same thing, so it might apply to everyone, but to do pedestrian surveys and start collecting some of that site-specific information to identify any kind of burrowing owls that might be on site. And then typically what we would do is, continue to do surveys as the project proceeds. And then there are always pre-construction surveys that are done ahead of time. If there are any burrowing owls located within these areas, the Arizona Game and Fish is consulted. And in some cases they would relocate the burrowing owls if there are any, or we would try to construct around them if that's a possibility. But I'll defer to others if they want to, the other applicants, if they want to add to that.
Thanks, Dave. That was very helpful. And I can talk a bit about.
Yeah, David.
Oh, go ahead, Stephanie. Go for it.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to
No.
add to what Dave was saying, and I'm sure the same would apply to Robert. That typically as solar developers, we would avoid constructing during breeding season if there are burrowing owls present. So, and I'm sure, Derek, you're about to speak to BLM guidance as well, but those are definitely considered as part of the construction process for sure.
Yeah, that's correct. I was going to say, kind of generally speaking about wildlife, the sort of the last follow-up question from Tim was about biological values that may be lost or remain during the life of the project, and what happens once the project ends after its expected lifespan. So I can kind of roll a bunch into that to just talk a little bit more about the wildlife biology and the processes that are involved in permitting. If these projects were to move to NEPA, there would definitely be deep analysis on wildlife impacts, both on direct impacts to wildlife individuals, if they're present. So there would be surveys out there to survey the wildlife that would be impacted, and that would be accounted for, as well as the loss of habitat, both, again, direct loss of habitat, indirect loss of habitat if there was, for example, an interruption in migration, and then the cumulative effects of loss of habitat from many of the projects that are proposed, both for federal permitting and non-federal permitting out there as well. So NEPA really has a very big area to discuss wildlife impacts, and we would require a very hard look at all of that within NEPA that disclose those impacts. As we learn a little bit more about those impacts, we also learn quite a bit about ways to avoid or mitigate those impacts as well. So we'll be, from the start of any project, engaged with the Arizona Game and Fish Department. We actually brought them in earlier today for these presentations, so they can start to get a look and wrap their heads around that, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Those are where the biologists, wildlife biologists are, with a lot of expertise on these projects, but also projects elsewhere in the country. They can bring in suggestions about design features that may avoid or mitigate some of those impacts, make suggestions, and ultimately talk about policies out there that need to be respected with regards to wildlife. And BLM incorporates those into the NEPA analysis, and ultimately, if a decision is made, what alternative and how that plan of development is authorized. And then finally, to kind of wrap it up, when the project ends in its expected lifespan, all the projects are required to have a reclamation plan as part of the plan of operations. So looking ahead as to how these sites kind of come back for multiple use after the right of way is reached its lifespan. So that reclamation plan typically includes soil restoration, reseeding with native plants, and kind of a restoration of the habitat that's out there to allow wildlife to recolonize the area if they had abandoned it previously. So hopefully all of that gives you some insight as to what's going on. As the plan of developments are really refined and proposed, we'll have more opportunities to talk about kind of specifics in NEPA, including what site prep may need to be done in terms of grading or vegetation mowing or vegetation clearance, and really get a clear picture as to what's being proposed. But we're not quite at that stage yet, but just to kind of give you an idea of the process that goes into it, we certainly aren't blind going into it, and we're ready to take a very hard look at wildlife impacts. So I appreciate the question. And if anybody else from BLM has something to add to that, by all means, come off chat and go ahead and add some insight. All right. Did that answer your question, Tim, or you got some other thoughts, or you follow up? You can feel free to come off mute too. You can unmute yourself. We're a civil meeting tonight.
Hi, it's Tim here. Yeah, you answered my questions and the other speakers answered the questions pretty well. It is a very interesting opportunity here. I do have one for the BLM. Could you talk again about the different, the category 1 solar energy zones, the SEZs? Are those all spoken for now? And how did these category 3 variance lands, were they looked at previously and a decision made that they wouldn't be put in category 1? And are you going to be looking at that information?
Yeah, I can kind of give you a little bit of a background on the kind of planning, the way it was set up. Yeah, so our solar energy zones are spoken for at this point. We have projects proposed in all 3. The rules for those were to make them competitively available at an auction, essentially. So firms had an opportunity to bid for the ability to propose a project, essentially. And we conducted that last December. We received bids on 2 of those, and those projects are in a kind of proposal phase right now. We don't have yet plans of development in there, but we do have projects committed. And then the 3rd solar energy zone, actually in Mariposa County, just west of Arlington, and the Gillespie Solar Energy Zone, that project we do have a proposal for that project, and it looks like it will be going to NEPA sometime this summer or fall. So that project is like essentially underway and kind of moving forward on that. So there's no more solar energy zones available, and yeah, so that kind of answers that. Now, in terms of the rest of these kind of like the 3rd category, the variance lands that you're referring to, they were looked at, they weren't really given a super hard examination in the rulemaking, the amendment process, the planning process, I should say, back when those solar energy zones were designated. They were sort of, like I said, the leftovers. Scrutiny was given to the lands that were going to be designated for solar energy, the ones that would be excluded, but then all these lands in the middle were kind of like, hey, we're not really sure what if they're good or bad or whatever. There's so many of them and they're so varied, take them on a case-by-case basis. And so that's really where we're at right now. We do have some information that is useful out of those planning processes, but they're over a decade old, frankly. And so, having this opportunity now to take a fresh look at these lands and really zoom in on a case by case, I think is productive. It, in a way, it slows the process down just a little bit of a stutter step towards getting permitting rolling, but it gives an opportunity for all of us to catch our breath, take a good look, and for the applicants to really consider some of the feedback and some of the unique challenges that might be there, so they can refine their proposal even a little bit more before we get into permitting, if we choose to go that direction. So there are no more plans to designate any more solar energy zones. So those are full, and we won't be going that direction, at least in the foreseeable future, to sort of green light anything. So everything is in this kind of yellow light territory at this point about, whether or not to move forward on it. And rules may change a little bit on the process, but we're pretty comfortable with what we're doing right now and in hosting these meetings and giving you all an opportunity to weigh in.
Can I follow up just a little bit with you?
Sure.
So does BLM currently have some lands on which there are existing solar projects? And would you think about having the public come and tour one of your existing leased sites, so that we can see like what it looks like once it's put in and established, and how it operates, and get a sense for what the impact is going to be down the road?
Yeah, no, that's a that's a really good question. I don't think we've really thought about having the public being able to come out. Right now we have one solar site, authorized solar site, actually being developed. For all the projects that we've had proposed through the years, only one's made it through. It's actually a NextEra project. It's the Sonoran Solar project down near Buckeye. And it is in construction right now. So it's definitely not a safe area to kind of move into or go up. There's definitely control, but after that site is up and established, we'll have to talk about being able to allow public access to it, or we might be able to go out and produce a kind of video to show what a finished solar site looks like. And I think that's a great idea from a public affairs standpoint to help show the public what these look like. I know that when we've had meetings in the past before, questions like yours, Tim, come up quite a bit. Like, what does it look like, and what changes on the ground, and what can we sort of see rather than just these kind of pictures that we have from other projects? There's really a desire to know about what these might look like in situ. So I appreciate the comment on that. I can't commit to anything right now, but that's a great thing I'll put in the back of my mind.
Thank you.
All right. I'm seeing no other questions come into the chat. So we're at about 1 hour and can kind of make it a nice round number here on the meeting and wrap it up right now. So before we go, I want to point out a couple of things. In the chat, I put a link to the project website. So that's available there to click on that, and you can bookmark that in your browser and visit that for any updates. On that project website, we'll also post a link to the YouTube account that we have where this recording will be posted. And then I have the email address as well in the chat. So you can send email to us and save the postage, the rising cost of postage. Just shoot us an email if you have written comments. You can put them on letterhead, or you can just put it in an email, and we'll make sure that we read those comments, answer questions if you do have questions, or at least get your comments incorporated into the variance reports. And that brings me to the last thing I want to talk about, which is the end game of the variance process. And after this meeting, what happens next, and where do these projects go? So as I said, we have about a 30-day period that we're accepting comments. We're accepting comments from our sovereign tribal partners. We're accepting comments from other federal agencies, local agencies, state agencies that have expertise in some of these resources, and comments from the public as well. At the conclusion of that 30 days, we will share those comments with the project applicants and allow them a chance to revise and refine their variance factors analysis report. So they may make some changes to their plan of development. They may incorporate some things about impacts or land use that they've missed before that other folks have brought up. We'll finalize that, and then BLM produces a report and a memo, essentially a briefing package that will go to our senior leadership, both here in the state of Arizona, but ultimately national leadership. We make a decision here in the state as to whether or not to move these projects to NEPA. So it's kind of like a determination on the variance, but we have to petition the director herself for concurrence on this. So these projects will move all the way up to the director's level. She'll give them a read and talk with her advisors and her staff there, and either concur or not on these projects. So there's still a kind of discretionary step here before these move on to NEPA. If there's a favorable decision though, we will know and it will move on to NEPA. I would say the timeline to knowing whether or not these projects will be candidates for NEPA is probably going to be towards the middle or end of summer. And after that, there will be more work to be done before NEPA gets rolling. There's some have alluded to some baseline surveys that need to be done, wildlife surveys and cultural resource surveys. So we'll probably be looking at fall for the beginning of NEPA on these projects if they were to continue to receive favorable support through the variance process. But there's a lot of bridges across, and the first one is definitely collecting information and feedback from our partners and the public. So with that, I will again direct you to the project website and the email address, and please contact us there. Your time and your thoughts are very important to us. And with that, I will call an end to this meeting. Thank you, presenters, for your time and detail in presenting. Thank you to our attendees, and thank you to BLM staff for being available to participate in this. Everyone's efforts are very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek.